When I first started messing around with the camera, I was pretty young. I want to say I was about in the fifth grade, maybe fourth grade, but I think it was probably the fifth grade. And it's a really exciting thing when you get your first camera or first get to start playing around with a camera because all your life, your short life, you've watched movies, you've watched television shows, you've watched cartoons, and it's really exciting to get your hands on something, press record, and move the camera around, play around with it, press, stop recording, and then watch back what you saw. When I first started picking up the cameras, my first camera, it was a little mini DV camera. So it was a little tiny tape that you stuck in your camera, and you can fast forward, rewind, play around with, and that's what I got started playing around with. And eventually, when I started making short films, I was using digital cameras. I don't really think I ever made a short film on a mini DV camera until after I had already worked on digital cameras, but I mini DV was always there in the background to some extent. The thing with digital cameras is it was another exciting thing, another step in my journey of filmmaking because I got this mini DV camera and the quality wasn't, well, it has a charm to it, the look of mini DV footage. I should put it that way because I don't think it looks bad. But when you compare the quality of a mini DV camera to a feature film made by Hollywood, young me was very kind of confused. Maybe not confused is the right word, but maybe just I had a lot of questions about how do I make something that I shoot look like something that I see in Hollywood. And a digital camera, or I guess a proper, camcorder, seemed like the next step in that process. And so when I used the digital camera throughout high school and I was making my short films, I would often operate the camera, filming everything myself, unless I was on screen. Very rarely would I have anybody else touch the camera. And if someone else was touching the camera, I remember feeling very precious about what they were doing. You know, it was a lack of trust on my end, but also just me wanting to control everything. And when I got into film school and got into college and I started making more short films, I made a conscious effort to learn not to do that, to learn to get rid of that instant reaction of only I can touch the camera, only I can record sound, only I can do this, this, and that, and all that sort of thing. So my job, or I guess my goal in film school when I was making projects in around that college age, was to touch all the equipment as little as possible. I wanted to be like any other great director in Hollywood. And a great director in Hollywood typically doesn't touch the camera, doesn't touch the sound equipment, doesn't touch doesn't edit their films, doesn't do all those different jobs that you have to do when you're a no budget filmmaker or when you're just starting out. Now, of course, I wrote my stuff, I directed my stuff, and I would edit because I like editing and I refuse to give that up. But for the camera work, for the sound recording, all that other stuff, I always put that into the hands of other people. And as a result, I feel anyways, I mean Ethan and Zach could probably tell you be a better judge than I am. I felt pretty competent at explaining my vision of what I wanted to people without ever having to touch the equipment. So if you watch a lot of my short films that I made when I was in college, I hardly ever touched the camera for any of that. Most of that was done by Ethan most of the time. I gave Ethan a lot of practice for his cinematography because I just made him shoot everything. And if you haven't seen this channel before, he's another director on this channel. He shoots a lot of my movies in general. Check out our movies and get familiar with Ethan's work. um, but anyway, after film school and a little bit post college, I was still very reliant on Ethan. I was still very reliant on other people, just in general, to technically help bring my vision to life. And I realized sometime around, I want to say Oh Brother, a feature film that I made in 2020 during the lockdown quarantine. I realized around then how technically unadvanced I was, how technically illiterate I felt around a camera, which felt very, very embarrassing and silly because I was a filmmaker after all, and I didn't really know how to use my camera that I had. Um, it was something that again I had opted because because when I was younger I didn't want to feel like I needed to control everything, and because I felt like I didn't trust anybody else to do my vision, I went the complete opposite way, and I let all the technical stuff be done by other people. And it helped me build up my trust with my friends and my crew. It helped me develop my communication skills, but it left me technically illiterate, which is just kind of, I think that's kind of funny. But with Oh Brother, that was a film that I shot entirely on my own, by myself. It was just me in my apartment and my camera and my sound recording gear, and I did that whole thing on my own. And if you go back and watch it, it's rough. Like, technically, I don't think it holds up very well. Um, but that was the first thing I shot all on my own in a long, long time. And ever since then, slowly, I've kind of gotten used to, or I've kind of warmed up to the idea of using the camera again. I've learned how to communicate my vision. I've learned how to work with people and tell people what I'd like to have happen on screen without having to rip the camera from their hands. And so in 2020, I went back to that. I almost felt like I went back to my roots or back to the basics of filmmaking. And I started learning how to use a camera. I started learning, all the technical stuff, how to, what shutter speed is, what aperture is, what ISO is, what white balance, all those technical things about filmmaking. I had to relearn in a sense. Now I'm at a point where I feel very, I mean, I'm not going to say that I think Ethan's a way better cinematographer than I am. I think he has a amazing eye for cinematography. I'm nowhere as good as him, but I feel pretty competent at creating visuals that at least I'm pleased with, or at least good enough if Ethan's not there, because I shoot a lot of stuff on my own now, without Ethan. It's all, I always love having him on set and having him help out with camera. Same thing with Zach. Zach's a very good cameraman, very good camera operator. And if you don't know who Zach is, watch our other videos on the channel. You'll you'll learn who Ethan and Zach are. Um, but now I'm at a point where I don't feel like I need anybody to use the camera. If I want to schedule to do a short film, and it's just me, it's just the actors, and if Ethan or Zach are not available, I feel pretty competent that I, on my own, can show up to the location or to the set with a camera and with some sound recording gear, and I can shoot the film myself. And I think knowing how to use gear, knowing how to use the camera, it might sound silly, but I think it's I kind of realize now how important it is. Because now that I can use the camera, when I'm with Ethan and Zach, I can communicate my vision even better than I had in years before. And if I don't have them, I know how to technically achieve what I want. It's one of those things that also extends to other elements of filmmaking. It's extended to music. Now, before, in college, in high school, I would rely on copyright music. When I started making feature films, I started putting original music in my movies. It was a muscle that I just built up by making GarageBand soundtracks just on my own, just for fun. And it was something I like to do. And now I feel pretty competent that I can score a movie, at least a movie that I make that I'm pleased with. And I've scored other people's movies as well, and that's a very fun thing as well. So now I'm at a point where if I want music in my movie, I don't need to reach out to a composer. I have myself. And if I want to use copyright music or not, probably not going to in the future. If you know, you know. I can choose to do that willingly. I'm not beholden to copyright music or public domain music or reaching out to other composers. The same thing goes for visual effects, for the most part. Now, I've dabbled in visual effects before. There's a lot of people out there who are way better than I am, but I know enough to be pretty comfortable around the idea of like, how will I achieve a special effect? If I want to put someone on fire, if I want to put a building on fire, if I want to do superpowers, if I want to do compositing of any sort on my own with any sort of CG element, I feel very comfortable in how to do that. I even feel comfortable opening up Blender and following along a tutorial to create an effect on my own. And I feel along with music, along with camera work, along with visual effects, I feel that same way about just almost every aspect of filmmaking. I feel that way with editing. I feel that way with directing, with writing, with all those elements that go into making a film. I feel pretty comfortable at doing all of those on my own. Now, do I think I'm the best at all of this? No, I don't. I think there's a lot of people who are a lot better at each of those things than I am. I like to tell people I don't feel like I'm the best at any one thing, but I'm pretty good at picking things up and learning new skills to be able to do something. And I say all this not to brag or not to be like, oh, great, look at how awesome I am. I'm not saying like that at all. I'm saying that because I know how to do all those things, I don't need anybody when it comes to making a movie. Now, that sounds ridiculous because movies are obviously collaborative. Obviously, I work with a team of people with all of my shoots. Obviously, a lot of people have helped me along the way, and I didn't do this all on my own. But I say that going forward with it's a very nice and it's a very freeing feeling to think of an idea for a film and feel comfortable enough that like if there is no one else out there who can help me with this, I know that I can achieve this on my own. Now, when I have people with me to can make those movies, it's all the more easier. It's all the more better. But when you practice these skills on your own, when you work at each of these individual aspects and elements of filmmaking, it sharpens your tools as a filmmaker. It helps you know what other people are going to be doing on your movie. It helps you be able to communicate with them. And again, you're not reliant on anybody to to help you make your movie. Again, filmmaking is a collaborative medium, it's a collaborative art form. Not every single movie can be made on your own with no one else. When you know all about those different aspects of filmmaking, you become sort of like a Swiss Army knife filmmaker. You're a lot more versatile. You're going to be able to converse with different departments and different people on location, on set, a lot more easier. And it's just going to make you feel a lot more competent as a filmmaker and competent and confident that you know what you're doing when you're on set. 5 years ago, if you told me I had to make a movie with superpowers, I would be like, I have no idea how to do that. I'm going to talk to a bunch of people who know more about the stuff than me. But now that I've edited a bunch, now that I've messed around with visual effects, I feel very comfortable showing up to set with the idea of just making a superhero movie or something with superhero powers. That's not something that like freezes me or stops me on my track anymore. I don't really know why I was thinking about this week, but that's just something that came to my mind that I wanted to share with everyone. Is if you're going to direct movies, if you're going to make movies, I think it's really important. Maybe it's obvious, but I think it's really important that you know how to do all the different jobs on a film set to some extent. You don't need to be an expert at it, but kind of just think about you got to be a jack of all trades, master of none. And if you can do that, you'll be a better filmmaker. We just made a movie last spring called Happy Halloween. There's lots of crazy visual effects and that sort of thing. There's spells flying around. There are mystical, magical beings. There are all different sorts of craziness that I would not have had the confidence to do 5 years ago. But having built up these skills over the last several years with the help of a lot of my friends and collaborators, um, I knew how to do everything in the movie that we set out to do. In fact, there was a pretty big visual effect element that was thrown in last minute. There was a character or there was an actor who was unable to make it the day of, and we were kind of out of a plan. And so our backup plan was, well, we could either recast this character with another person who we need to have in set that we don't have locked down right away, or we could put we could put a magical floating pumpkin in its place instead. And it was only because I've been able to practice these skills over the last few years that I felt confident that yeah, I can put a floating magical pumpkin in this movie for sure. No problem. And it worked out great. So yeah, that's my little piece of advice to all you filmmakers out there for this week. Stay tuned for when our Halloween movie drops called Happy Halloween. It's going to be coming out this October. Details TBD, but thanks for watching, everyone. And let me know in the comments down below what advice you have for any filmmaker out there.